Hey, everybody, welcome back from the break, and I hope you enjoyed that time. And I'm very excited to connect with you here with our next speaker on today's agenda, and that's Mr. Brandon Brown, as many of you can see and tell already. And for those of you that don't know who Brandon is, or maybe haven't had the opportunity of just seeing the success and the leadership that is Brandon Brown, Brandon started in the business back in 2007 and has sold over $4.7 million for his career so far. And the crazy thing is, when you look at the numbers, actually 3.7 of that, so all but 1 million of that has actually been sold in the last 5 years alone. So that's over, any of you that are doing the math right now, you're thinking to yourselves like, wow, that's over $750,000 a year on average, and that's absolutely true. Brandon currently holds the record for annual sales by a single person in 1 year, and that was almost $1.1 million in a year. And that's actually what we're here to talk with Brandon about today. So, and it's really just to talk about, today's conversation is really going to be about like what Brandon learned selling over $1 million in a year. And, the goal of today's message with Brandon is really like to understand from his perspective what some of the biggest lessons were, what some of the biggest challenges were, and just the things that he put in place leading up to that year and throughout that year to really help him even be able to perform at that level. And so I think it's important for everybody to know that going into this interview, I really thought to myself, hey, I could come up with a bunch of questions on my own here, but really, I would love to know what are the biggest questions that the community has for Brandon. So I want to say thank you to many of you who submitted questions to me prior to this event so that I could be prepared with quality questions for Brandon. And so many of these questions are from you and many other people around the nation in the CSP and FSM community. And I've also thrown a couple in here as well myself. So, but I'm very excited to connect with Brandon. Brandon, thanks for being willing to deliver this message for the community. I think this is going to be something that's really powerful. Whether people see themselves ever wanting to go after selling $1 million or not, I do believe that there's going to be themes that emerge today from our conversation that will serve anyone at any level in the business, no matter what they're shooting for, how big their goals are. So thanks for being here, man. I'm super excited to connect with you today, and looking forward to seeing what comes of this interview today.
Absolutely. Excited to be with you and everybody else here.
Yeah. One of the things I really love about Brandon Brown, those of you that are watching and listening right now, is that, one of Brandon's highest values is in personal and professional development and really developing the skills and support necessary to be positioned to always be doing his absolute best. And this really shows in his results, but also in how he's grown as a human. And one of the things that I've appreciated most about Brandon personally is that he's not just doing what he does to have his own success, but he's really doing it also to serve and impact other people who want to grow themselves in their businesses. And this really shows in the work that he does with the Western region, with all of his mentees, and really anyone that you talk to who's ever had a one-to-one conversation with Brandon. Everybody always talks about how much and how focused Brandon is on serving. And so, so Brandon, your time's extremely valuable, and I just want to dive right in here and just go right into the questions. So, so first question for you, buddy, is really simple. People want to know, how many past customers do you have? How does your business look when you break it down layer by layer? Can you help us really understand what almost $1.1 million broken down looks like? I think it really comes down to, there's multiple questions here in this topic, but it really comes down to, how do you strategically approach a year, where you're selling over $1 million from the perspective of time and planning?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good question. And, I'm excited to obviously be able to peel back the layers as well of what that breakdown looks like. So as far as customers, I've been spending a lot of time presently cleaning up my CRM. And so I have about 5,500 customers now that are my ROR customers. As far as breakdown of where the CPO came from, about 420 grand came from traditional events. ironically, 415,000 came from military bases. So it was a pretty even split in that regards. I had 130,000 that came from service events. And the remainder, if you're doing the math, which is right around $100,000, came from essentially phone orders, emails, marketing of sorts. And so that was the last cherry on top, if you will, that created the just shy of 1.1 million. And really of that, there's maybe about 20,000, give or take, that came from business gifts and realtor. So that hasn't been like a huge focus of mine, and also an area that I know has a huge opportunity for what I could create in the future as well. As far as days worked, because I know I've had a lot of people ask me that, so I figured it'd be worth sharing, is 105 days through traditional shows and events. So that's including like a state fair, and that's also including a service event and anything in between. So 105 days in that area, and then 89 days working military bases. So collectively, essentially any day working in the field adds up to about 194 days in the field. And that's not including days where maybe I'm making calls from home or responding to emails and things like that. But as far as days in the field, it was 194 days. This was a statistic that I was excited to learn also, which was last year, of what I sold, 375,000 came from past customer business. So that was either, some of that was obviously the 100K in phone orders and emails, right? And then some of that was just working shows and having my past customers show up. So about 375 grand, so about a third of my year. And then of the just shy of 1.1 that I sold, I wrote up 1,300 orders, which I was proud of from the standpoint of what my average order was across the board, which is just over $800. So that's, whether that's a phone order, a military customer, or anything in between, that's what the average was. As far as, that's what it's broken down layer by layer, right? And when I look at how I allocated my time or how I approached my year, if you guys have known me, mentored with me, had more than just one conversation, or maybe even just one conversation, you will have probably heard this. I mean, this was one of my first slides at NET this year, was talking about two of the most valuable commodities, which I really have learned to embody and I'm constantly working towards mastering. And that's, where I invest my time and what I pay attention to. Those are two things that I regard very highly. This obviously isn't an overnight success. I've been with Cutco for 13 years. 2 of the years I stepped away from Cutco, but essentially 11 years I've been actively in Cutco, 13 total. And, after the year in 2016, when I sold 660 grand, I really began channeling my energy into growing my business and either working the same or working less. So I was very cognitive of how much time I was investing into the business and the CPO that I was creating from that. And shifting to that perspective a few years ago helped me get into a creative space of how I was going to do that. And so there's 4 things that I would say that really helped in where I focused my energy. One was efficiency at shows, because there's only so many shows you can do. So how can you be as efficient as possible in those shows? CPO maximization. Each customer you talk to can only buy so much. You're going to either hit a budget threshold, or you're going to hit a time constraint threshold or something, right? So CPO maximization within what you have available to you. And then third would be not letting people walk. There's only going to be so many people that walk through the door. And of those people, there's only going to be so many people that actually talk to you and who are actually in the market for buying. And so of those people, being able to not let them walk and close. And then the fourth is delegation. Doesn't matter who you are, you only got 24 hours in a day. And so how you allocate that time and delegating as many things as possible, these are all things that I did that have really helped me, and things that I focused on to build me up to creating the year that I did.
That's great. So, two big things I really pull from that are two extremely powerful quality questions that you always want to be asking yourself. Where am I investing my time, and what am I giving my attention to? And then also just really understanding that, the layers of the business, and that, that multi-layered approach. Anytime that we talk with, the best of the best in the business, the people performing at the highest levels most consistently over time, one of the most common threads that we see as a through line in all those people's businesses is that, the multi-layered approach to the business is the approach that garners the largest, growth traditionally over time. And so because it just really I think there's a lot of reasons that it makes it successful, but it's something that people have in common, and it's important to acknowledge here. So thank you for sharing, Brandon. So next question for you here, really, looking back at last year, I'm curious, do you believe that you gave it your all? Or did you have anything left in the tank at the end? And also, what strategies do you feel really helped you avoid feeling burnout throughout the year, especially after periods of time that really require extreme focus and extreme effort? Because I know that there are months where you sold a couple $100,000 a couple times throughout the year. I know that there was a lot of time out on the road. I know that you have a life that's not just eating, breathing, sleeping, drinking Cutco, right? And so I know that burnout is a real thing for a lot of people. And so people want to know, did you give it your all? Did you have anything left in the tank? And what are the strategies that you're using to really help you, stay focused and stay at your best and avoid burnout?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't say I gave it my all in the sense that I sacrificed everything to hit it. I definitely had to embrace what I call like my inner warrior more than normal to tackle like the back half of the year. Because if you look at the numbers, it was like I'm not on track to obviously hit it. So I definitely had to embrace my inner warrior gladiator to make it happen. But, my goal going into that year, my goal wasn't to sacrifice everything. A matter of fact, my goal was to hit the $1 million from a place of alignment and being able to do it without sacrificing other areas of my life that are important to me. I've been there early on in my career where I'm grinding to the very last day. And through years of doing that, I realized that wasn't something I wanted to do. And if I was more tactful going into the year and put more, planning in place, I wouldn't have to be in a place to do that. And so that was something that I prided myself on implementing at a certain point in my career, which I was able to do. I look at, as far as burnout, I definitely wasn't burnt out. I look at everything in life as an exchange of energy. So a great analogy. Think of your phone. The more you use it, the more it loses battery. Same with you. And you have to be able to learn how you work. So the more things you go throughout your day, the more active you are, the more apps that are running in the background. Essentially, those are all things that deplete physical, mental, emotional energy, right? So you have to learn how you operate and your tendencies. And through that, you also have to know what your limits are. But really the only way to figure out what your limits are to test them. And so through that, sometimes, you push a little too hard. You maybe experience some burnout, and that's okay. That's part of like life and experiencing, what life has to offer. But I look at limits as essentially, as you push through to that next limit, you're essentially expanding your capacity of what's possible. Think about when, the first time you were trying to go after $10,000 for a push period. It's like, I don't know if I'm going to do this. This seems like impossible. And then you hit it. And then all of a sudden, the second time you hit $10,000, it's not as hard because you're expanding your capacity. So I look at that, if we're using the phone analogy, as getting an upgraded iPhone, going from the 4 to the 5, the 5 to the 6, 6 to 7, so on and so forth. And what's interesting using that analogy is that every phone that gets upgraded has what? More battery life. It can sustain longer times of being used without being plugged in. And so through that process, learning about myself, learning about what are the things that I'm exchanging energy for, and how much energy is it taking? Sending a text takes less energy than making a phone call. Making a phone call is less energy than FaceTiming or live streaming a video. And so through the years of going through this process, I really experienced what are the things that are going to give me energy. And when I'm expounding, or when I'm using a lot of energy, exerting a lot of energy, and whether it's mental focus or whatever it might be, I'm making sure that I have things leading up to that event, during the event, and post-event to really make sure I can sustain and then go into the next event without feeling depleted. So, it's a long laundry list of things that I do because this is something that I value so much. But I would say some of the most pertinent ones is I get monthly massages. That's something for me that I just value and I'll pay the money to do. I meditate relatively frequently. I think it's a great practice that helps rest the mind, especially as an entrepreneur and running your own business. There's always something you can be doing. Sleep. I protect my sleep. If anyone who's hung out with me long enough knows, like, hey, I want my 8 hours of sleep. There's some people that can go less. Great for you. I want 8 hours of sleep or more. And I'll whatever it takes to protect that. And I think that helps a lot as well. Exercise. That's an important value for me. And then probably one thing that maybe less people do, but I believe is very important, is mini vacations. And mini vacations could be something as simple as a staycation in your own town and just going to a really nice hotel and having, a spa day, relax by the pool, whatever it might be. And so these are little things that I do that I get to that bring my energy up, help me maintain energy throughout an event, and have things to look forward to afterwards when the going gets tough.
That's great. And it's awesome to see just the focus on self-care, because I think it's so easy, especially as an entrepreneur, to always feel like we have to sacrifice the personal life in order to, achieve the business life that we want to build. And I think, Brandon, you've been a great example, because these aren't just things you're doing now that you're selling, 800,000, 900,000, a million. These are things that have been in, practices that have been in place for years, that have really opened the opportunity for you to do that. And I think it's a great example of, hey, Eleanor Roosevelt's quote, that says, we can't pour from an empty cup. And so it's really like saying, hey, I need to take care of myself in order to be able to take care of my business, and understanding that you can build a business and a lifestyle at the same time, and you don't have to sacrifice one for the other. So, all right. So Brandon, next question here. What was the most challenging moment or time during your $1 million mission? And really, what did you learn from that experience? I'm curious, what did you do to overcome your challenges as you were going through the year? I know you faced many throughout the year because you posted a lot about it on, Instagram. Anybody that's following your Instagram will know. And also, I'm curious, what were your biggest lessons overall for the year?
Sure. So I would say there's a specific moment that stands out as a moment where it really tested the ground that I was standing on. And I haven't experienced a moment like that of challenge to the scale that it was in a very long time. And it makes sense because I was going after something that I've never gone for before either. And so it was the second weekend of the LA County Fair. So keep in mind, we're 8 months in, we're in the 9th month, September, second weekend of the fair. It's a Friday or a Saturday, so it's a relatively busy day. And just, it's important to probably have some perspective here, is like at this point, to hit the record and to crack through 1 million, I was at like $550,000. And so to break the record, I needed to have a $500,000 plus campaign to make it happen. Keep in mind, I've never done that. I'm pretty sure no one's ever done that. And so not only was I relatively significantly behind, but I'm at, my biggest event. I got to be on my A game. Like every order, every day counts. And I get a message because I was planning on working a military base internationally in October. And I was like, all right, this is going to definitely help and give me a fighting chance to do it. And I find out, for different reasons, that essentially the event won't take place. The international military base won't take place. And keep in mind, Matt and I are planning on going to this event and internationally, and we were projecting, based on our skill sets and the length of time we were going to be there, that I could personally sell 100,000. He would sell roughly 100,000 too. So this is like $100,000 event. And obviously we don't know for sure, but that's what essentially I had in the business plan, right? Now it's not happening. And this is essentially 3 weeks before we're supposed to go. So it's super last minute. And keep in mind, I still need to sell, $500,000 for the campaign. And so it was a very challenging moment. I also had to show up. It was midday of, Friday or Saturday. So I had to still show up. So this was a very challenging moment for me. And I realized that at that point, there's nothing I could physically do about the international plans. And all I could really focus on is the physical day and the customers I was going to be in. I can't spend any energy, right, on things that are outside of my control. So I was like, I'll worry about this once the day's over or once the weekend's over. But right now I just need to be fully present. That's not going to change anything. And so that was, a powerful perspective I had. But really the lesson was, no matter how well you plan for your year, no matter how prepared you are for challenges and obstacles, there's still going to be things that pop up that are out of your control that you're not expecting. So accepting the fact that those are going to happen is critical. You don't want to use any energy and trying to suppress it or push away. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And, so that's one part, but also preparing for obstacles that are going to come your way that you're not expecting is also key. Expect the unexpected, right? That's the saying. I've shared this quote before. You don't rise to your level of expectation. You fall to your level of training. And in this case, you fall to your level of preparation or planning. So the better you can prepare, the better you can plan for things that you can't even necessarily foresee, the better off you'll be, the better position you will be to still hit what you need to hit. And so the way I did that personally is, when the year started, I planned my entire year to do 1.1 million without any CPO coming from holiday marketing or sale emails of any sort. So I knew I was going to sell over the phone. I did, 100,000 or so, but I wasn't going to put that in the plan, because even though I had multiple safeguards in place, right? This was that extra safeguard that if something came out of the sky and a meteor hit, at least I had $100,000 cushion. And guess what? That meteor hit and I had that in place. If I didn't have that in place, if I didn't put the tools and systems in place, I for sure wouldn't have hit it. So it was definitely a big test and challenge. And obviously it helped me get to where I was. The last thing I'll say on this topic is, you always have enough data when you've been working for a company long enough. You always know what your averages are. So at that point, once you have the averages, everything's a mathematical equation. The only variable really is you showing up as your best, which is why there's been a constant theme of energy and how you're showing up, attention, and time. So yes, one show, two shows could go badly, but the probability of like multiple shows going badly is very rare. Happens once in 100 years, essentially, And so knowing that and knowing that that's the mathematical equation, putting a plan in place that supports whatever your goal and knowing that everything will unfold the way it needs to, as long as you show up powerfully every single day.
That's great. And what's fascinating is when you combine that commitment with that planning and preparation, and even thinking through, like, what if things don't go the way that I want, with the things you talked about previously to this question, Brandon, about taking care of yourself so that you can show up powerfully every single day. That really seems to be the recipe of success. So what I'm really taking away from this so far is, hey, take care of yourself. Make sure you figure out, what do you need most to feel full or to feel fully fueled, so that you can always, bring your best self forward, have the best chance of bringing your best self forward. And then also, like, what are you doing proactively to strategically plan and prepare yourself for the ideal, the ideal year or the ideal campaign or the ideal push or whatever period it is that you're planning for. And then also, like, expect the unexpected. So think through, like, what could be the things that go wrong here, and how am I going to be prepared to pivot if I need to. And I think all of us, at this time, have been forced by nature to, really learn this lesson, I think, right now, because, no matter where you're at or what state you're in or what's going on in your world around you today, in terms of how you can even go out in the world, if you can even go out in the world still or not, this is a time where it's so important that we're all thinking through, hey, what is my plan based on right now? What is my plan based on if things get worse? What is my plan based on if things get better? And so I think it's such a important message, especially during this time, Brandon. So thanks for sharing that. Okay, cool. Let's talk about a different one, right? So I want to shift a little bit out of the business and more into, like, how are you finding balance with your personal goals, business goals, family, and relationship goals? Because I know your personal life is extremely important to you, and it's something that that you really feel both feed each other. And so, and also, like, do you put more energy into one than you do others? And if so, what are you really doing? Like, do you put more energy into one than you do others? And if so, what are you really doing to support the areas that you feel are not in balance?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something I teach my mentees. So this is going to be a great component for everyone to really grasp and understand. So when it comes to balance, let's just talk about the word balance in relation to your world. Balance, in the sense of the definition, actually doesn't exist. Like, there's no such thing as balance. Balance is meaning equal amount of time here and equal amount of time here. That's what essentially a balance, if you look at one of those old school scales, right? So balance doesn't exist. So once you accept that, realize that, it makes things a little bit easier. Even when you're walking, right? Every time you take a step, if your left foot isn't in front of you when you take that step, you would fall over because you're essentially leaning forward. So everything is in imbalance. So that's just an important concept to grasp. So what is there? So the word I use is harmony. There is a harmony that you want to strive for. Well, what is harmony? Well, if you think, I'm not very musically gifted or talented, so excuse me if I'm not saying anything correctly, but when it comes to harmony, it's multiple sounds, multiple instruments coming together to make this beautiful harmony. But not every instrument is the same loudness or the same amount of repetitions, right? They all work together in tandem to support this beautiful masterpiece, essentially. So really what that is it's, quality over quantity. So I think that's important to grasp, is how can you create more harmony in your life is a great question to ask. And, if you were to look at why is it that people can get things done when they're against the clock? Well, it's human nature. Like if you're up against the wall to hyper focus and give hyper attention to a specific area, they increase that so they can get it done in a short period of time. You go back to school, it's like, all right, it's midnight, should probably work on the paper, it's due tomorrow. So imagine if you can create that environment where you can get things done not only effectively, but also have the most powerful outcome. You've heard people say, I do my best work if it's last minute. So it's like, how can you create that powerful outcome and work efficiently? And to do that, right? And so you have to have the right systems in place. And that's super important to create. So you have a boyfriend, you have a girlfriend, you have a husband, you have a wife. You know, maybe you're not spending as much time with them as you are working on your business, but are you spending the right type of your audience, know their love language, and optimize from that? And sometimes a simple text, a simple note, a handmade lunch can do wonders in that specific department, let's say. And so being able to know what are those different areas and what's needed to optimize and to create an environment that allows hyper level of production and efficiency and still have that powerful outcome at the end of the day. So for me, you know, I'm constantly evaluating different areas of my life. That's something I've learned in the last couple of years significantly and much more powerfully. And so, you know, identifying what those pillars are, it's a great place to start. And then once you have those, if there's something that's out of balance, let's say, or isn't where I want it to be, I ask myself a very simple question. What is the desired outcome I'm looking to achieve in this area? So if I feel that my time investment with my family isn't where I want, hypothetically, as an example, what is the desired outcome I'm looking to achieve in this area? What would that actually look like? And write down a level 10 of that experience. And then once you have an image of what that is, then identify, well, where am I at now? Am I at a 3? Am I at a 5? Am I at a 7? And what are the steps needed and how much time is needed to achieve level 10, to achieve that desired outcome? And so essentially you're just reverse engineering once you have clarity around what you're going towards. And so if you're constantly evaluating, the powerful thing is if you're constantly evaluating, you won't let anything slip off too far down the rabbit hole, and you can catch it at a 6, you can catch it at a 7, you can catch it at an 8, and you're not doing this huge overhaul. I learned this from my DVM when I was much younger. It's like you have all these plates spinning. Well, if one starts to slow down, you can like get it to spin again. But if it crashes, you have to stop everything to fix that plate. And then what happens? It's a domino effect.
Yeah, that's great. What are some of the other, this is a quick little follow-up question here, Brandon. I'm curious, like, what are some of the other areas of your life where you found this to really help you? So you've talked specifically about like personal relationships, but can you share a little bit with it? And it's obviously helped you in your business, but can you share a little bit of where this has also helped you in other areas of your life, just going through kind of this routine of self-assessment?
Sure. Personal growth. I mean, that's definitely like a pillar that I have in my life, and asking, and they're all interconnected, right? It's like a web. And so you've heard, you know, bigger the house, the bigger the library. Well, which comes first? Well, obviously the library, and then through having a wealth of knowledge and then applying it, you get the bigger the house. Well, the same thing with personal growth for me is like, I know if I want to achieve something, or if I want to expand my own potential, I have to be able to invest into myself and grow myself, and so that I'm more prepared. And so I think every single area in my life, both, you know, having passions, things that I'm excited about, whether it's something as simple as like working out, or my new passion here is yoga. So especially with being at home so much, is I'm doing yoga and I'm realizing how inflexible I am and how much room I have for growth. And I know being able to like get the body in alignment, and also it's a great exercise. These are all things that are going to help other areas of my life. So knowing the interconnectedness of them and valuing them all equally is absolutely crucial.
That's beautiful. I love that concept of harmony too. Like replacing the word. I want all of you to think and ask yourself, like, if you replaced the word balance with the word harmony, how would that change things? If, you know, in terms of how you're pursuing things in your life, how you're thinking about things in your life right now and in your business, you know, such a powerful thing. All right, Brandon, next question here. What 3 to 5 things would you want up and comers in the business to know as they pursue achieving their own goals and dreams while they build their best business and lifestyle? Like, what would you teach them to do, and also what not to do based on what you've learned through your own experience?
Yeah. So there are a few things that come to mind by your typical answers, which I think is good, you know, different perspective. So one is get really curious, or be really curious with what you are capable of, and spend less time comparing yourself to others. The reason why this is something I learned in the last few years that has been exponentially impactful for me. And especially when we're in a sales organization where it's natural to compare and compete, you know, you're always comparing yourself. But what you're really dropping the ball on is what your potential is, what your capacity is, which might be greater than what anything Cutco has seen. But you won't know that unless you actually get curious first. And so, quick story, that is when I made this shift, is when I came back into the business in 2015. You know, I sold 400 grand, and I think I remember specifically Curtis selling like a little bit more than me in a different category. And I remember thinking how people were talking about Curtis, and up to that point, I was like, well, I want to be the best. I know I can be the best. I'm going to push to be the best. But what I was doing is I was also limiting myself by comparing myself to other people. Curtis lives in a different state. He has, you know, his focus points. Like, we're two different people. Love the guy, absolutely. But why am I going to compare myself to him? And so for me, I shifted the focus to, well, what am I actually fully capable of? What could I create if I just went all in, versus listening to the rules of what, based on what other people are producing. And that was like a massive breakout year. If you remember, I went from 400 grand to $660,000. I don't know anyone who jumped that much in 1 year. And so that was the shift. So that's one thing. Number two is clarity is king. Not cash, clarity. So get clear on your vision and what you want, both short term and long term. But also understand that, you know, it's going to evolve over time. As you evolve, your vision, what you want, will evolve also. And that's completely okay. But it's important to have direction in where you want to go, because that makes every little thing you do more purposeful and helps you move forward a lot faster. So that's number two. Number three is leave your ego at the door. Especially as you get higher into the ranks of Cutco and sell more and more and more, your confidence grows and grows. Your ego can grow as well, especially because, you know, we have such a great culture of supporting and acknowledging people's success. So it's easy to like stand on that platform. So it's important to leave your ego at the door, because if you can do that in all areas at all times, your ability to grow and learn 10x's. And that's hard for some people to do. And that's okay. Like some people have that as a challenge more than others, but being able to be humble and willing to learn and grow constantly and knowing that you can learn from everybody. I learn from my mentees, so accepting that and knowing that just gives you much longer of a runway. You can go faster, higher, more quickly. And then I would say number 4 is, this is a big one, treat every customer like they're worth $100,000 in income to you. If you treated every single customer like they would bring in $100,000 worth of revenue or more, how differently would you treat them? And that's important because one day you might find someone that does that for you. And guess what? Along the way, on that same road, through that level of respect and intentionality, you'll actually create more CPO, more income, and create a better experience with all the customers you meet along the way than you would have ever even imagined. And so when you treat someone with that level of respect, they actually respond to how you're treating them, and they'll show up more powerfully for you because you're showing up more powerfully for them. I have 5,500 customers. I'm just shy of $5 million. I'm essentially at like 900 CPO per customer in my entire career. I mean, I don't know anyone else who has like that much CPO per customer. And how quickly can I get to 1,000? How quickly can I get to 2,000? Because I really believe that's possible.
That's great. I really love the thoughts around comparison because, I love all of this, Brandon, everything that you're sharing today, but, comparison, like why compare yourself to others when others have had completely different experiences and are dealing with completely different circumstances than you? It just doesn't make sense, right? And then I think what you're speaking there to in the last piece is just really the law of reciprocity, like making the choice that even if a customer's just buying a cutting board from you today, doesn't mean that they deserve any different experience than the person who's buying $50,000 from you today. And so how can we treat every customer the same? How can we create that world-class experience for every customer? Because when we choose to show up that way, it gives the space for the law of reciprocity to kick in, which is, customers feeling valued and taken care of no matter who they are or what they're buying or how much or how little they're buying. They just naturally want to come back and create similar experiences for you because subconsciously they feel that feeling. So, dude, you're definitely world-class in the way you show up for your clients. I've heard it from people that have cross-trained with you. I've heard it from people that have, mentored with you. And of course, it shows in your results as well. So, thank you for sharing that, Brandon, because I think it's important for people to hear. All right, so just a couple questions left here, Brandon. I want to give us the time and space that this really deserves. So feel free to take your time. There's no rush here. But was $1 million in sales for the year your actual goal? And if so, why was achieving that important to you? Can you help us understand better your own personal motivations for such high levels of achievement?
Sure. So yes, what I sold was my CPO goal for 2019. For me, for anyone who's gotten to know me, there's always been a very strong importance and value around exploring the depths of my achievement within Cutco and what's possible. That's always been a mission of mine. And in the last few years, it had shifted with more clarity, as I talked about, to being able to explore my full potential and expand my own capacity so I could inspire other people to do the same for themselves. And that's something that has been close to me in my heart over the last several years. And so, I wanted to sell $1 million, but it was more important that I sold it in a way that was where there wasn't burnout, where there wasn't massive sacrifice, where there wasn't you know, disharmony, if that's even a word, or imbalance. You know, I wanted to be able to do it from a place of alignment, which I've already referenced. I wanted to step across the, you know, the finish line gracefully, where I could say, yeah, I could do this for the next 10 years. And I could say, like, you know, obviously our scenario now is a little different, but I could, stepping across the finish line in 2019, there was no reason for me where I couldn't sell $1 million or more for the next 10 years because of how I was doing it and how I was building the business up where it was sustainable. And so, you know, now my motivation, it was important for me to do that because that was like a big chapter in my achievement book. And so I really wanted to hit that. But over the last couple of years, also, there's been an evolution of personal achievement to being able to be motivated to develop my own leadership skills, and create other titans in the Cutco business in different states, in different regions, who can do a closer proximity to a different community across the board. And so essentially dropping those rocks in different parts of the lake that create these different ripples across the board. And so that's been one of my biggest driving forces, specifically to last year, and why I wanted to work so hard to create that. And this is also why I also invest so much into my personal growth, is because I want to be able to show up the way I need to create those results and be able to lead others to do the same and show them what's possible as well.
That's beautiful. So I love the focus on servanthood and just, you know, helping others be successful through your own success. And the example of your own success. So, you know, in a past interview, Brandon, you referenced how you work hard to maintain a high level of energy and presence with your clients, mainly so that you can pick up on and interrupt their pattern when you feel that they're sliding towards the path of not purchasing. So I want to go back because I'm curious, is this just level 10 attention and focus as a result of managing your own personal energy so well? Or are there other tips and tricks that really help you with staying a step or two ahead of your clients at any given time? And if so, like whichever it is, can you expand a little bit more on that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So so for sure, significantly, like personal energy is a big thing that leads to higher attention, more focus. So that's a massive component. There's a couple tips that I could probably share that emphasize that a little bit more or bring more depth and perspective that I think will be useful. So the first thing I would say is, you know, if you're spending any time thinking about what to say next from the script that you just memorized, or already know what you're going to say because you know what the customer is going to say. So you like essentially shut off. You're like, oh, I know what Josh is going to say. So I'm not even going to listen to what they're saying. I've heard this objection. He wants to talk to his wife, which a lot of top reps do because they're like, I know my scripts. Then you're already at a disadvantage because your level of presence is diminished greatly. You have to be able to hear the words, feel the emotion behind the words, essentially use as many senses as you can to identify with the customer. You know, some part of the question. So sometimes it's not really about getting one or two steps ahead of the customer, but it's just knowing where the customer truly is. So I think that's a great place to start, which is a project in itself. But really knowing where the customer is, because then when you know where the customer is, you know how to serve them at a higher level. And what you think might not actually be. The second thing, I use analogies all the time. It creates a lot more color. You know, think of a puzzle without a box. Okay, so you have all these puzzle pieces, you have no clue what the image is, right? All those puzzle pieces, right? That's every word the customer is speaking. So each puzzle piece is a word that the customer is speaking. You have to listen to every word, right? And it's critical to listen to every word. Otherwise, you're going to miss out on some of the puzzle pieces, essentially. And if you don't listen enough, or if you just think you know what the image is of this puzzle piece, right? You're essentially losing those puzzle pieces. They're falling under the table, they're sliding under the couch, the dog ate them, supposedly, right? And so if you lose too many puzzle pieces, then you can't even create the image. And if you can't create the image, that's essentially like losing the sale. And so really being able to listen intently to every single word the customer is saying. You know, the other part is being able to know all possible outcomes that a customer can go for. So as soon as you hear some type of social cue, like, oh, I really like that set, I need to talk to my husband. Ooh, or I like that, I should think about that. Like I hear that word, it's like, okay, that's an objection that's going to be coming up, where it could be said so passively that you don't even acknowledge it. So then everything, and so you need to shift based on what you're hearing. It's like, oh, I love that set. That's a good thing to think about. Okay, cool. That's going to be coming later. So how can I position my words around that? It's like, in knowing, so you got to know all the possible outcomes. You guys have, Josh, you've probably seen the, it's like not a meme, but you turn on the faucet of water and it says, well, which cup is going to fill up first? And you have to look really closely to know, because they're all different, right? So you have to know the last cup, which is the sale, you have to know where the water is going to go. And so you can't spend any time thinking about what I'm going to say next or assuming what the customer is going to say, but be fully present. And then once you see that, it makes it easier to know what to say based on what the customer is experiencing.
Yeah, and this is really a skill set that I think it's important for people to understand is developed really only through experience, right? And I think that it's something that you get better and better at every year, Brandon, because of the amount of time and energy that you invest into customer conversations, you know, and it's also kind of like illustrating the snowball effect, right? So, you know, the steeper the hill that you roll the snowball down, the faster the snowball goes and the bigger it gets by the end. You know, and so if you give yourself more shots with a customer in a shorter period of time, you're going to garner the experience and really develop this skill set at a much faster rate than if you work a fraction as hard as you could if you were bringing your absolute best forward. So, so something to think about as you listen to and watch this. You know, the question you got to ask yourself is, how can I get myself in the game more often and in a much higher quality way, so that I can get more shots, so that I can have more of those conversations, so I can, you know, really, it's like studying that meme that you're referencing even more often than you currently are. It's like reading your favorite book over and over and over again to really deepen the lessons from that book, because, you know, you really like it that much. So if you really want to get your absolute best results and you really want to be able to be 100% fully present with the customer and always be able to know what all the different potential outcomes are and how to adjust and adapt in the game, you have to play at a championship level, but you also have to practice at a championship level as well. And so practice comes through experience. I think it's an important lesson that's important for people to really understand and hear. So last question for you, Brandon, and then we'll wrap this puppy up. How do you personally develop new sales skills? And what's your process for skill development in any of the key skill set areas? Also, what do you believe are the cornerstone skill sets that people need to develop in order to maximize their results?
Yeah. So, you know, asking the question, what does a sale, how does a sales skill set get developed? Like, how does one come about? Well, you have to try something that you think works on a customer. But how do you know what will work? Well, obviously through trial and error, but the best way is you need to be the customer. You have to essentially immerse yourself as them through the process. And once you are them, you can then ask the powerful question, what does the customer need to be feeling right now? And how do I lead them to feeling and thinking a certain way, the desired outcome? And it's important to lead and not pull or not push, right? But lead them through that process. And so, as far as the question that you asked, Josh, around how do I develop new skill sets? I mean, at a certain point, when I wanted to start doing things that no one else had done before, I don't have anything to reference necessarily, right? So it's self-taught, it's self-created. And so this process of being the customer, asking myself, how's the customer feeling in that specific moment? And what do they need to feel to move forward process helped me come up with language and questions that move the customer from point A to point B. And, you know, I've heard a lot of people say this when they've field trained with me. They're like, where did that come from? How did you know to say that? How do you keep talking when the customer is trying to walk, 10 minutes ago, 15 minutes ago? And it's essentially that. Like, some of the things I come up with are just on the spot because I'm so in tune with how the customer's feeling, and I'm really trying to embody that in this interaction. It's like, okay, this is how they're feeling. So, if I was in that situation, what do I really need to feel safe to, purchase it right then and there? So I would say that's, a big part of it. And then as far as the cornerstones, I would probably say there's 4, right? 4 cornerstones. One is EQ. Plain and simple. I consider that a skill set and something that people need to develop to maximize their results. EQ, emotional intelligence. There's IQ and EQ. My IQ is not that great. My EQ is through the roof. And so being able to know the situation and cue in on certain things is huge. There's books you can read, practice, right? We just talked about practicing it. That's huge as well. So that's number 1 is EQ. Number 2, other cornerstone, handling objections. So that is just a cornerstone skill set that you have to not only learn, but master, get comfortable mastering it. I don't get uncomfortable ever when I hear an objection, because I've heard every objection. I know any possible objection that could come. And so that confidence and the mastery in how to respond to those objections is really powerful. Number 3, relationship with what's possible, or expansion, essentially. So you want to improve the relationship that you have with yourself and what's possible, what you're capable of doing, what can be created. And really what I'm talking about there is, lifting the ceiling of what you think is possible, right? What is a big order? What is a big day? What is a big week? What is a big year? Most of the time you're limiting yourself in that process, and that really slows down your progression and slows down, maximizing, right? Which was the question, maximizing your results. And then the 4th is super important, and that is simplicity. Everybody needs to hear that, even if you're a top CSP, because I know top CSPs that like to talk to their customers and talk and talk and talk. Simplicity, right? Being able to articulate the message in as little amount of words as possible with the same outcome, same impact. And the other component of that, which you have probably heard, is being able to explain something so a fourth grader could understand it. So being effective in the words that you're using, and part of that is also using a lot less words to deliver the same message. If you focus on those four areas, in my opinion, everything else will kind of just fall into place. And those are huge pillars that have a huge correlation and impact to maximizing your results.
That's great, Brandon. And I just want to say thank you for the time today. I mean, we covered a lot of different bases, from, the breakdown of your business and your $1 million year, to your motivations, to your skill sets, to, handling objections, to, really all sorts of different things, the challenges and how you overcame them, being adaptable, just so many different bases. And I appreciate you being willing to, be challenged by some of these questions, and also be able to just articulate your thoughts around this in a way that I think people will really comprehend and understand, and be able to take home and do something with in their own personal lives and their own businesses. And so I just want to say thank you on behalf of the entire community for your time today. Thanks for just showing up as you always do in a world-class way, and best of luck to you as you work through the rest of this year, my friend, and adapting to the challenges that we're all facing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm grateful to be able to be here and offer value to everyone listening, and I'm sure you got a few good nuggets from it. So thank you for your time as well, and everyone who has been listening and paying close attention.